Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I'm in my kitchen today and I'm gonna be showing you guys how to make sauerkraut, homemade, from scratch, at home. It is so unbelievably easy, you guys. I actually, the first time I ever made it, was shocked at just how easy it was and also how few ingredients are involved. I thought it was just a little bit more of an involved process. It's really not. So I'm gonna show you guys how you can make it yourself at home. So the reason you might wanna even consider eating sauerkraut is because it is a fermented food. I feel like people either love sauerkraut or hate sauerkraut. I love sauerkraut. I could literally eat like bowls of it. I just think it's so good. I kind of think it tastes like pickles. Now, I will say, if you have tried sauerkraut and you hated it, make sure you're not trying sweetened sauerkraut, because you can go to the store and you can buy sauerkraut that has sugar added, and I personally think it tastes horrible. I hate it. I think it tastes nasty. I can't eat it. But if you have sauerkraut that's not sweetened, you may find that you actually really like it. It's tangy, it's sour. And again, I think it kind of tastes like pickles, and I know a ton of people love pickles. So if you've tried sauerkraut and maybe didn't like it and didn't think it tasted like pickles, maybe you should give it a second try. Okay, so before we jump into how to actually make your sauerkraut, I want to just quick talk about the benefits of eating sauerkraut and why it's, you know, a good idea to have it in your diet. So sauerkraut is basically fermented cabbage. It's a fermented vegetable. So what makes this so special and so beneficial health-wise is the actual fermentation process. So when you take a raw vegetable that is from the earth, it's going to have some microbes and bacteria naturally occurring on this raw vegetable. So what we're gonna do is we're going to kind of create a brine with the cabbage, and then I'm gonna let it sit on my counter, and while it's sitting on the counter, that bacteria is going to grow and multiply, and it's going to actually ferment the vegetable. So when you end up eating it, you're gonna be eating all of that beneficial bacteria. So if you've ever heard of taking probiotics, which is like a pill, this is the exact same thing, except it's probiotics straight from nature. So our ancestors used to eat fermented foods all the time. They were a total staple in their diet, especially in the winter months, because they would take, you know, all of their harvests from the summer and they would ferment a ton of those vegetables so that they had naturally longer shelf lives, and they would be able to, or shelf lives, and be able to eat them throughout the colder months when they weren't able to grow those vegetables. Now, in turn, by fermenting them, they also were getting these amazing beneficial bacteria benefits from eating this food. Now, as we've grown a society and we have supermarkets that have fresh vegetables all year round, this practice has just kind of fallen out of our culture unless you have tried really hard to make sure that you hold on to those practices and still make fermented foods in your own home. You can also buy fermented foods at the grocery store, but I will say the kind that I personally really love is very expensive for how much you get, and you can make a ton of it at home so easy and save so much money and be able to eat it every day if you wanted, and it's not gonna cost you a lot of money. Now, I also wanna share with you guys that I do have a couple videos here on my channel, specifically in my Nutrition 101 series, that I wanna direct you to. If you are new to just learning about gut health and beneficial bacteria and probiotics in general, you definitely should go check out these videos. So I have an entire video going in depth on gut health, talking about the microbiome, talking about your intestinal walls and keeping those intact, and basically the 3 parameters to a healthy gut. And that's gonna give you a full background, all the information you basically ever wanna know, the basics of what a healthy gut looks like. And that kind of sets the stage for understanding how probiotics interact with our microbiome, which basically just replenish bacteria, they diversify it, we have new strains introduced. And if you're not taking probiotics, and if you're not, you know, traditionally eating fermented foods like all of our ancestors used to, you're probably, you know, you're missing a piece of the puzzle when it comes to your health. So taking in probiotics, whether it's naturally from food, whether it's taking a supplement, is definitely a good idea and something to highly consider, because gut health is so important. Okay friends, so now let's get into the actual tutorial portion of this video. So first, what you're going to need to make your sauerkraut, the only 2 ingredients, I'm about to blow your mind, cabbage, and you're going to need some salt. that is it. That is the only thing that you need to make traditional sauerkraut. Now you can get fancy, you can add like herbs, caraway seeds, dill, you can have fun with it and, you know, put a little twist on your sauerkraut. But traditionally, just to make straight up sauerkraut, all you need is salt added to cabbage, and the cabbage will sweat and make its own brine. I actually did not know that. I just assumed there was like vinegar involved and you had to create a brine and then soak the cabbage. It's not actually how it works. It's even more simple than that. So what I'm actually gonna be storing my sauerkraut in, this is just a half-gallon big mason jar. So I'm gonna be filling this up all the way to the top with shredded cabbage, and it will have the brine that was created from the salt and the cabbage itself. It's gonna sit on my counter for a little bit, hang out, ferment, and then soon it will be ready to eat. And once it's ready to eat, I will pop it in the fridge and we will enjoy that sauerkraut for as long as it takes us to eat it. It will stay good for a while. Okay, so for the actual process of making sauerkraut, I've got a few heads of cabbage here. And again, I said I'm gonna make enough to fill up a half gallon's worth. So the very first thing I'm gonna do is just take off the outer layer leaves, because we're actually going to use these later in our jar to make sure that our sauerkraut stays below the like brine line. So I'm just gonna go ahead and peel off that outer layer of each head of cabbage. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start to chop up the cabbage. So you can see there is like a core inside, and we're basically just gonna be cutting it down to the core, kind of like an apple. So we're just gonna be slicing into it. And then I'm gonna be using a food processor to actually shred the cabbage. You could technically chop it up yourself. I'm just gonna be removing the core, and then I'm just gonna kind of cut these down into slightly smaller pieces so that they can fit through the top of my food processor. Okay, so my cabbage is all chopped up and I've got my food processor ready. So you can use, this is what I use, one of the little inserts that come with the food processor. This is basically gonna shred it down until it's pretty fine. So I'm just gonna turn this bad boy on and we're gonna start shredding. We've got all of our cabbage shredded up. It's so easy when you use the food processor, and I love how fine it is. So this is really the fun part. This is where you get to get your hands dirty and actually see the magic of sauerkraut. The very first time I did this, I was honestly shocked that this is how you make the brine. Everything you need to make the brine is right here with a little salt added. So this is definitely the fun part. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start adding in, I'm just using, this is like fine sea salt. So whenever I do this, I use 2 tablespoons of salt for this much cabbage. So that was 2 heads of cabbage, and this is a 5-quart bowl and it's completely filled up. So I'm kind of like, I tend to wing it in the kitchen. I'm not someone who's like really specific. And whenever I do 2 tablespoons of salt with this amount of cabbage, I really like the way that it turns out. So that being said, if you really want to make sure that your brine is perfected, because after it sits for days and you're so excited to, you know, finally start eating it and you don't like the taste, it might be because the brine was a little bit off. So what you can do if you want to be more precise is you can make a separate little brine to basically train your taste buds to what the brine that you're making with your cabbage should taste like. Grab a bowl, put in 1 cup of just like warm water, and then add 1 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt to that water. Stir it up so it dissolves, and then taste it. So when that mixture, that ratio of salt to water, that's kind of the taste that you're looking for when your brine starts to come out of this cabbage and salt mixture. So that will help you kind of make sure that your brine ends up being right around where you want it each time, so that you end up having a tasty sauerkraut in the end. Okay, so like I said, this is the fun part. So I'm gonna take 2 tablespoons of sea salt, And we're just going to sprinkle this all over the cabbage. And then we're gonna get in there and start to massage it all in. So what this does is it essentially makes the cabbage sweat, and it's gonna start releasing water, and you're gonna see that it starts to just like get soaked with water. It's actually like the coolest thing. This would be so fun to do with your kids. It's kind of like a science experiment, because when you first start massaging, the very first time I did this, it just seems so dry, and you're just like, how is this gonna happen? Like, I just don't see it. And then all of a sudden you will start to see it, and by the end I will squeeze the cabbage and it will just be like dripping with brine. It's the coolest thing. So let's get in there. Okay, so this is what it looks like when it's all done. Do you guys just see all of this like juicy brine? It's seriously magic watching this happen. Okay, so now the hard work is done, except for maybe the cleanup. And we're just gonna start adding this kraut into our jar. You can see just how juicy it is. It's gonna be so good. So that is our brine, and that's what it's gonna be soaking in. So once I get this all filled up, I'm basically just gonna pop it on my counter for about a week, usually. Now, once you are at like the 2 to 3 day mark, you can start tasting your cabbage. Everyone kind of has a different preference with how sour, you know, exactly they like it. So just go ahead and start tasting it around that time. I usually let mine go for about a week and until I like the taste of it, and then I will just pop it in the fridge, because if you're sitting it out at room temperature, it's going to continue to ferment and it's going to continue to get more sour. Now, the longer it ferments, the more of that beneficial bacteria will be in there. So keep that in mind as well, but it does not have to be, you know, it's just until you enjoy the taste so that you'll actually want to eat it. So we've pretty much got this all filled up. Now, you wanna make sure, you do wanna fill your jar all the way. So I'm gonna like literally get every last little scrap that's in here, and then I'm gonna pour the rest of the brine, because we have a bunch of brine in the bottom here. So I'm just going to top that off. So as you can see, that 2 cabbage head, aka fills up a 5-quart bowl, is pretty perfect for filling up a half-gallon jar. So now remember, a few minutes ago when we started, we saved some cabbage leaves. So you're gonna want these because it's really helpful to keep the cabbage below the brine line. So that is super important for one main reason. You do not want any oxygen getting up into your sauerkraut that is fermenting, because anything in the presence of oxygen has potential for mold to grow. And we obviously, after all this hard work, do not want our sauerkraut to get moldy, because that's not fun. So I'm just gonna use a few of those leaves and just kind of push everything down so that all of that sauerkraut is below the brine. So you can see I'm just kind of pushing. So now I've got lots of liquid up top here. I'm gonna actually add one more for good measure. And then on top of the leaves, I use a weight as well, just as like double insurance. So I have, so fancy, you guys. This is literally a rock from my garden outside around our house, and I just wrapped that puppy up with some plastic wrap. So obviously I'm not having like a dirty rock sitting in my sauerkraut. You can buy weights made for this purpose, but I don't know, I use a rock, it works fine. So that's all we're gonna do, and then the last thing is we're just going to pop a lid on. Okay, so I've got my mason jar lid right here. I am just going to pop this on the top. You do not want to screw it on tightly. I repeat, you do not want to screw it on tightly, because there are gonna be some bubbles that come up out of here, and you want those to be able to escape, or you're gonna have like an explosion situation, which again, we don't want. There's already enough cleanup involved in making sauerkraut. So make sure that your lid is not securely on. You just want it to be loosely on top, just like, you know, if you make like a sourdough starter, It's the same idea. We want it to be able to breathe. And then also I put mine, I have this like cute little earth and hand plate. Doesn't have to be cute, but there will be more liquid that kind of drains out of here. You'll start to see it collect on the bottom, under the bottom of the jar. So I just use this little plate. It is like the perfect size to hold my jar. And then I'm just gonna let this bad boy sit on my counter. Again, I said I do about a week. Start tasting around day 2, 3, see how you like it. Let it keep going if you want it to be more sour, if it still tastes a little too cabbagey. And also keep in mind that kind of depends on the time of the year. If you're making sauerkraut in the dead of summer, your house is just naturally going to be warmer. Things are gonna ferment faster because bacteria love warmth. If it's the dead of winter, it's gonna be the opposite. It might take you a little bit longer, so keep that in mind. Depending on the time of year, you might not do it for the exact amount of days. So that's why you always wanna be tasting as you go so that you can pull it right when you are loving it, basically. Okay, you guys, so that is it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. I hope that you are going to try sauerkraut. And again, if you are someone in the past who has not been a fan, make sure you have tried just those traditional sauerkraut with no sugar added, because that is not my favorite. But anyway, so thank you guys so much for watching this video, and make sure to check out the gut health and also the probiotics video that I have in my Nutrition 101 series, just to kind of give you guys a intensive nutrition background on this whole topic to help you understand a little bit more why probiotics are important and beneficial, and also just how our gut works so that we can do our best to keep it healthy. Thanks again for watching. Make sure to subscribe, follow me on Instagram, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.